Welcome to Ocean Stories, a podcast about the people doing incredible things in, on, and around our oceans. I'm your host, Lydia Carey, and I believe in the power of stories to save our seas. Hello everybody, this episode is all about sustainable tourism, exploring topics of carbon emissions from planes, how to travel better, and how to just be a better tourist, a better person that loves to travel. Before that, I go into a small rant about the state of our world, so if you're not into that sort of thing and you just want to hear about sustainable travel as it relates to the ocean, skip forward a few minutes. Thanks for your patience during the delay in episodes. And thank you so much for the support that you've all shown on the last episode. Maybe I should disappear a little more often because there was so much positive feedback about our last episode about how to start a sustainable surf brand with Sunday Surf. So if you didn't have a chance to go listen to that and you're interested in that sort of thing, I highly recommend it. So many things have happened over the past weeks. It's hard to be as chipper as normal. In the last week, pretty much Appalachian and southeastern communities in the US have experienced horrific, catastrophic, record-breaking floods that have left entire towns completely underwater. And because of the water, the towns also are isolated from aid or evacuation. If you're not in the US, you might have seen the headlines about Hurricane Helene. Such a shame they named the hurricane after such a pretty name, Helene. But anyways, it hit the states of Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina, and more than 4 million homes have been affected. I'm sure that a lot more people than 4 million were affected by the storms. And of course, I'm talking about the storms because the climate crisis is accelerating the frequency, rate, and intensity of tropical storms every single hurricane season, and this year is no different. Vulnerable communities, that means low-income areas and communities of color, are always the people that are worst hit by these storms. My heart just goes out to the people that are being affected by this right now. Yeah, I don't like to be political because I think that a lot of environmental issues have been so heavily politicized, which has been quite sad because it makes conversations so much more difficult to have when one side and the other is sticking so strong to their party identity or just like really strong, harsh opinions, unwilling to hear the other side. I think it tends to hurt discourse and conversations. I think it tends to put us farther away from solutions. But I will say it has been weighing very heavy on me, the conversation around the military-industrial complex in the United States and how much money we put towards our own military and other countries' militaries. It bothers me that the fossil fuel industry receives $20 million in annual government subsidies, and meanwhile, because of these exact fossil fuel companies, communities are completely underwater in our own backyards. I think I'm not the only one in the world who sometimes feels like they don't know what to say or don't have a right to speak on these things, and I'm nervous to even say anything about the American military or the American government because it's so divisive. But just know that everything I say comes from a place of truly trying to seek solutions and to start meaningful, open conversation. It's just been weighing really heavy, a feeling of hopelessness, and I'm sure that everyone has their opinion on what should be happening or what shouldn't be happening. I'm always trying to learn and to listen and to do what I think is right. Why am I saying all of this? What am I going on about, on and on and on about? I don't know. Climate change is here. It has been for a while. All you need to do is turn on the news to see that. And if you care about these issues, then you care about politics. I have seen a lot of conversation happening about not voting, about how it's like, oh, well, both sides are bad and you know, this and that. And I'm no expert, but what I will say is voting is the one thing we have. Voting is one of it's the one thing we have. To not vote in times like these, to not vote, yes, you can go vote and you can be begrudging and you can be, oh, it's the lesser of two evils and but to not vote when we have issues like these, like in our faces every day, it's a huge FU to everyone that cares about the environment. It's a huge FU to the environment, really. If you give two crapolas about the earth, then I highly suggest you consider voting. It's just shocking to me that people would be so easily willing to give up such a hard-fought right in something that is just what I see as like a number one pillar of democracy. To give that up, it's like, wow. Where the government puts money and which policies that the government makes directly impact human life and the natural world. If that isn't glaringly obvious by just going on Instagram and scrolling through your feed and seeing the disproportionate impacts of natural disasters and seeing which industries are receiving subsidies and seeing the way that our economy is built and how it destroys nature. You might be thinking, oh, if you're watching the video, you're probably like, oh, Lydia's wearing a new outfit. Yeah, it's because yesterday during that really deep, dark moment of reflection I was having about the state of our world, when I was starting to feel like hopeless and just reminiscing on all of these topics, my roommate came home and I had to stop recording. If you feel hopeless like me, or if you ever feel hopeless like me, vote. Vote and have a conversation with people about it. I do believe in the power of conversations. I do believe that change happens at the dinner table. And by being a little bit more open and a little bit more willing to listen and to understand, we can get a lot closer to solutions than we are right now. And I don't know, that's something that I can stand behind. When it comes to the world of online and the way that conflict is talked about, the majority of what I see is incredibly harsh, strong, hyperbolic, very black and white, aggressive language. I do believe that radical action is needed to change our world. I think we need radical change in our world. But I do want to be a soft landing for people, because there is so much fear that comes as a result of that aggression, and the fear prevents people from taking action. The fear makes people feel confused, and it prevents them from making small changes to make the world better. And I do think that the fear contributes to the hopelessness that leads people to believe that they shouldn't vote. And I just can't get behind that. I have seen a lot on Instagram saying, if you're an environmentalist and you don't believe in XYZ thing, well, you're going to hell because you're not an environmentalist and you might as well throw your trash in the ocean directly. I'll say that I can't fully get behind that. My own recreation of that meme or that graphic would be something like, if you're an environmentalist and you're not willing to admit and explore the intersections between our government spending, the climate crisis, and human suffering, I'm sorry, you're living on a prayer, and you're sorely mistaken, because that's what's going on. And we got to figure it out ASAP, yesterday. Into today's topic, which is an exploration of sustainable tourism. I recorded this entire episode, and when I was done, I closed my computer and I said, wow, that was the best thing I have ever recorded for Ocean Stories. I mean, when I tell you it took maybe 3 or 4 hours of repeating myself, going through everything, and I closed that computer, I opened it back up to go edit the episode that night, and the microphone was on mute. So best believe I'm staring at my computer right now and I'm like, okay, is it on mute? Is it on mute? No, we're not on mute. We're good to go. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and I felt like it was the perfect time to talk about it because summer is ending slowly, and because I love to travel. And I often feel like a hypocrite because a lot of the content that I post on Instagram is me traveling, and I love it. I'll put my hand on the whatever and say that I'm like addicted to traveling. Being in the airport and like being on a plane itself is such a special experience for me. I find it invigorating. It gives me reflections about my life. I get so much out of travel, of course, in the destination itself. And on the other hand, I'm completely aware of the negative impacts of travel and how, since travel has become so much more accessible to people, more and more people are traveling all the time. Since COVID, a lot more people have flexibility. People are open to new ways of living, aka doing remote work, doing freelance work. And because of that, people are taking a lot more planes. And because of that, there are a lot more emissions. So there's a lot to unpack here. So whether you're on a walk, grab a cup of whatever you like to drink, coffee, matcha, water, and let's get into it. Traveling and tourism is an ocean story. Anecdotally, you probably already knew that because when you look at where people go for their vacations, they're always going to the beach, to the lake. But I was really, really surprised to find out that coastal and marine tourism accounts for over 50% of global tourism. That means that more than half the time that we take trips, we're going to a coastal area or a marine environment. That means that a healthy and thriving ocean is quite literally the foundation of the worldwide tourism industry. Yet, as you know, the ocean is facing serious risks and threats like pollution, biodiversity loss, acidification, just to name a few. Not only is a healthy ocean imperative to the tourism industry, but it also relates to the carbon emissions created by extra voluntary travel. The ocean is a carbon sink, which means that it opens its mouth and soaks up carbon dioxide that's extra in the atmosphere, regulating the world's temperature. A healthy ocean absorbs up to 90% of the Earth's excess heat. And if you've been living under a rock or something, I'll just fill you in right now. Human activity is causing a lot of excess heat into the atmosphere. Okay, global warming. Okay, all of this is to say that as tourists, we have a responsibility to look into and explore how the things we're doing are negatively impacting the places that we're going to visit. When you visit a new place, you're visiting a new community, and I think it's part of our job to make sure that we are not doing anything to destroy that community. That would ruin the entire point of visiting it. It shocks me that more people aren't onto the wave of sustainable tourism because it's very intuitive. But I digress. As part of the research for this episode, I found an article on the Sierra Club by Dayton Martindale, which is a fantastic read about the carbon footprint of air travel and how to travel more sustainably in relation to emissions. So if you're interested in that topic, I'll link it in the description. But it touches on a really interesting conversation that I've seen a lot happening on Instagram. I've noticed a little correlation, a little connection, and you tell me if you see it too, between people that love nature and love the earth and people who also love to travel. I think it has something to do with when you go out and you see the world, you see these beautiful, amazing places, it inspires something in you. It inspires this passion for conservation and for protecting what we have on this big floating rock. For me, it makes total sense, but it also means that people who care about the environment are oftentimes the ones jet setting around, causing all of these emissions, aka pointing the finger at myself, all right? I also noticed that a lot of the people that I really admire and look up to online as sort of speakers and thought leaders on sustainability and the environment, that they have to travel a lot because they're going to conferences and they're going to be speakers and they're going to be on the news and to promote their new book, which hats off to them, but it creates a little bit of a question in your mind. Like, what's going on? The thing is that air travel is nowhere near the #1 creator of carbon emissions, and individual people taking economy flights are not the biggest issue. I am not trying to absolve people of their responsibility to look into other ways to travel that create less emissions. For example, taking a lovely train ride. We come back to the issue of placing the blame on individuals and placing the responsibility on regular, everyday people and not on government policies that can actually make things like trains and buses and more sustainable forms of travel more affordable, more available, more reliable. It's really the wealthy, frequent flyers of private jets that create the biggest carbon emissions from air travel. In the Sierra Club article, it says, one report estimated that in just over 4 hours of flight time, a private jet emits more CO2 than the average European does in a year. In a year. It's just something to take into account. It's important to think about people that are in the span of one day creating more carbon emissions than the average European would in their entire year of activities. Aviation is such a tiny percentage of worldwide emissions. By comparison, passenger road vehicles, aka cars, trucks, etc., they emit 4 times as much. Burning coal for energy accounts for 40% of our global emissions. So when you see little Susie on the internet, she's just beating herself up and feeling so horrific for taking another flight. I think that these are all just contextually important numbers when we're talking about emissions and how to make travel more sustainable. Of course, here in the United States, it's incredibly difficult to get from place to place without taking a plane. And that's coming from one dedicated girl. Rather than prioritizing investments into alternative forms of transportation, the United States is currently expanding our airport infrastructure. In other countries like France and Spain, grassroots movements have been really successful in trying to get a tax on jet fuel and a moratorium, which means a stop on new airports and airport expansions. In France, I've seen that there's a huge movement to end domestic flights on routes that can be covered by a short train ride, which in some cases is the majority of flights in any given small European airport. This Sierra Club article taught me a lot. On average, traveling by Amtrak, which is the train system in the United States, the public train system, is 34% more energy efficient per passenger than air travel. Yet, our investment in our subsidizing of public transport is so bad in this country. Historically, the subsidies for Amtrak have been so small in comparison to the subsidies that we give to highway and air transportation. For example, in 2023, Amtrak's federal budget was only 29% of what the Federal Aviation Administration's budget was. If there were more investment, potentially Amtrak could have cheaper ticket prices and become way more competitive with air travel, making it like a more appealing option. As it stands right now, long-distance Amtrak trips are expensive, and sometimes they're even more expensive than flying on a small budget airline. And as human beings, we are always going to pick the budget airline over the long-distance train trip unless the price is a little bit lower or at least competitive. Another huge complaint I've seen about Amtrak is that the trains are always delayed. I didn't know this until I read this article, but it's because in most states the freight companies own the rail lines that Amtrak runs on, which means that the Amtrak trains are completely at the mercy of the freight rail. So whenever a freight rail needs to stop and wait and unload and whatever, the passenger train just has to be like, okay, I guess we're delayed today. On top of all of this, the Amtrak trains only go so many places, and there is a lot of places in the United States where the train lines just don't even exist. If we're going to make travel more sustainable, I think one of the first things we should look at is treating public transit like a public service and giving people better options so that they are able to make a more sustainable choice. Imagine if the government created subsidies or invested in a federal jobs program that trained well-paid drivers for the Greyhound buses. If there were more drivers, there would be more routes, more consistently affordable tickets, and hopefully less delays, because the delays are caused by a lack of drivers. Wouldn't that just be grand? Of course, if you are somebody who loves to travel, it goes without saying, I think that when there is a train route available, if there is a train route available and you are traveling for pleasure, for fun, for exploration, definitely organize your trip around so that you could take the train, because you're voting with your dollar, you're supporting efforts to expand public transportation, showing that there is actually a demand for it, and it also just creates less emissions. Plus, train travel can be actually a freaking lovely way to travel. Have you ever taken a train, put in your headphones, and just looked out the window and stared at the countryside? Because I have many times, and it's incredible. You basically ruminate on everything that's ever happened to you, and it adds a whole other layer of fun to your trip. Just quickly before I move on from talking about airports and airplanes and air travel, I did find out that direct flights are better in terms of emissions. Planes burn the most fuel when they're taking off and landing, so short-haul flights cause a lot of emissions because they're always taking off and landing every hour or so. Moving on, where are you actually taking that train, bus, or plane? Where are you actually going on your vacation? And is it a place where they are happy to have you, or is it a place where they are literally begging you not to come? Now, this is a very, very sensitive topic and is very contextual. I think it depends totally on the place, the factors, what's going on, the history, so many things that influence this topic. I will say, though, that it shocks me that people don't do more research into where they're going before they go. I don't think you need to sit down with a pen and paper and go on to journalistic publications and look up studies about that place and read them for hours and hours. I do think you need to look up destinations that prioritize sustainability, smaller, less tourist-heavy destinations that are oftentimes working to preserve marine ecosystems, which reduces the overall environmental stress of tourism. Eco-friendly destinations do exist. There are a lot of countries that are investing money and creating programs into making hotels and boutique stays, accommodations more eco-friendly. There are even websites and search tools that can help you identify destinations that meet high sustainability standards. If nothing else, though, simply do a Google search and read the news articles about what's going on in that place. Understand what's going on. Has there been a natural disaster recently that has really put the people in a tough position? Has there been a switch in government policy that's making hotels pop up everywhere on previously protected areas, one of the hotels you're going to go stay in? It's just a good idea to look at what's going on. What are the people who live there thinking and saying? What are they experiencing? And is this a place that I will be able to go and spend my money and give my dollar to the local economy and support the region? And maybe even give my money to something that would support a marine protected area or a conservation initiative versus just seeing a place on Instagram, booking the ticket and showing up and being like, what's up? Meanwhile, there's protests in the streets because you didn't think, oh, they're in a water crisis. Anyways, you know how else you can help the community? Plastic waste and waste reduction, especially if you're in an ocean or marine vacation, if you're at the beach. Bring your own reusable water bottle on vacation. Bring an extra little bag, like a little tote bag that you can put in the side pocket of any of your other bags that you can use as a shopping bag. Choose to eat in places instead of carrying away so that you reduce the amount of plastic utensils, plastic straws that you're using. I like the tip to avoid pre-packaged snacks by buying food at local markets so that you're not only eating fresh, unpackaged produce and foods, but you're also giving your money to a local vendor and you're also reducing your plastic impact. It's a triple whammy. And basically, anything that you can do to reduce the amount of plastic that you create on vacation is important. And this is totally intuitive to anyone that gives any hoot about the environment, but it's cool to get creative and to challenge yourself. I think on my next trip that I take, I'm going to completely challenge myself to have no plastic straws and no plastic utensils. Those are ones that I forget about. I'm traveling, I'm living my life. I don't often look around and think, oh my God, no plastic straw. So it's just something to be extra cognizant of, and maybe you can create a little challenge for yourself around it. When you're booking activities, ooh, this is a big one. Sustainable ocean tours, responsible, ethical wildlife tours. It can be really difficult when you don't know anything, like me, to know if a tour that you're doing before you get there is actually going to be sustainable and ethical. Thank goodness there are other people that do know and that are willing to help share that information with us plebeians that have no idea and are just trying to have a good vacation. I'm talking about snorkeling trips, diving trips, wildlife tours. All of these have eco-certified equivalents. Oftentimes, the more sustainable tour will have clear conservation goals and strict guidelines on their website that talk about how they protect marine life or how a portion of their funds goes into conservation. This should go without saying, but you should never be a part of a tour that harasses wildlife. If you're looking around and there's 100 people jumping into the water basically on top of a whale shark, question it a little bit. Never touch, feed, or chase marine animals when you're snorkeling or diving. You should have a safe, ethical guide that helps you to keep a respectful distance from any wildlife that you see. What's really cool is that now there are a lot of volunteer opportunities where on vacation you can even volunteer with local conservation efforts. There's always a beach cleanup going on or some conservation project, so go on Instagram, type in the search bar, beach cleanups, location, and see what you can find. Don't be afraid to ask your hotel or some local tour provider about a volunteer opportunity or how you can help out. I have made the mistake before of showing up to a tour and being like, whoa, I don't actually know if what I've just given my money towards is actually good for the animals. And it's a horrific feeling because you feel like you could have just funded something that's actually doing more harm than good. In this case, it was turtles. And I still regret that a lot. I'm not the one that booked the tour before you come for me, but it's just something to keep in mind that a lot of places rely on tourism to sustain the economy. And that means that there's lots of people that are always coming to try and get their dollar. Everybody's trying to get their bag. And that means that everyone trying to get their bag is sometimes going to exploit the animals and the wildlife in their area to do so. And when you pay those people, you encourage them to exploit the animals even more. It just takes a little bit of extra research, a little bit of comparing companies, etc., to make sure that this doesn't happen. When you're traveling, which toiletries are you bringing? And are they ocean safe? Reef safe sunscreen. Are you using reef safe or reef safer sunscreen? Are you using products on your body? Are you putting on sparkly glitter oil on your body and crazy stuff in your hair and then jumping into the ocean and you see this little film on the top? You are literally putting chemicals right into the coral reef, babes. Try to avoid sunscreens with oxybenzone and octinoxate, which damage coral reefs. If you want to learn more about this, we have an entire episode about sustainable sunscreens. Little plug, by the way, we do work with a sustainable sunscreen brand. If you are interested in buying what I believe to be the best of reef safer sunscreen that has been specifically formulated to be safe for humans and safe for the environment, Stream to Sea. Okay, they not only have sunscreen, but they also have this leave-in conditioner that I've been putting on my hair this summer before I get in the ocean. It's like this common trick that hairdressers will tell you to do to protect your hair from the salt water. But when you do that with any old hair thing, you're putting the chemicals in the water. At least with the Stream to Sea one, you know that you're putting an all-natural thing that's literally been tested to be safer for the fish. If you want 10% off on any Stream to Sea product, our code is Ocean Stories. And you're also supporting the podcast. This extends to other products too, though. This is super interesting to me and something that I want to improve on as a traveler. I don't often bring all my Stream to Sea products when I'm traveling, but there are some areas with different sorts of plumbing and different water systems where the products you use might be going to the ocean a lot quicker than you think they are, which is interesting. I want to learn more about this. But it just makes me think it'd be awesome if I was using Stream to Sea body wash, Stream to Sea shampoo, all of their stuff. So that way I know if I'm in a place where, I don't know, I'm taking an outdoor shower and there's runoff that goes to the ocean or to a river, something like that, that what I'm using on my body is not going to literally kill all the leaves and plants that it touches. There are also so many plastic-free travel product solutions now. It's really cool. I've never used them, but I've seen those toothpaste tablets with no packaging. There's also, of course, shampoo and conditioner bars with no packaging, but they do make travel containers for those. There's just a lot of small little choices you can make when you're packing your bag, when you're at the store, and when you're at your destination that make you a lot more of a cognizant, mindful traveler. Call me crazy, call me wild, but I do think there are a few things on this earth that would be a lot better if people would just give it a little think, give it a little bit of a second thought. You know, when you're choosing restaurants, choose the local restaurant that has the mom, pop, and grandma working out front. When you are picking destinations, give it a Google search. Give it a little looking into before you book your ticket. The internet has made us more connected than ever, and it's showed us more places that we probably would have never even known about or seen pictures of if it weren't for social media. It means that we have desires that we never had before. I don't know why I want to go to the Canadian Rockies. I don't know why I want to go to Banff. Oh, it's probably because my friend Hannah went and did an Instagram post, and I thought, wow, that's beautiful. Now, this is a good thing, I think, because the world is obviously more connected. We know about more places. We have a more global perspective. We're becoming more open-minded. But it's also negative because did the people in the Canadian Rockies really want me to come? Like, do they want me to come? And what if I put up a post about the Canadian Rockies and it goes absolutely viral and then millions of people start coming every year? Are the towns there prepared to handle that? This is a random example. I don't know anything about what's going on in the Banff region. But because we have access to these places, it also means we have access to what the people there are saying, to what they want, to what's going on there. If there's millions and millions of people overwhelming the resources and the infrastructure in these towns, I'm sure that there will be something on the internet about it that I could read before I go, and I could say, maybe not the best time to go, maybe another time. I recently had a conversation with an adult professional who I really admire, and she asked me about some of the major threats facing the ocean. And I was telling her about the importance of coral reefs and how the ocean is a carbon sink. And I was telling her about ocean plastics. And I was telling her about chemical pollution. And she said something to me that I've been thinking about ever since. She said, wow, that is really interesting. Nobody that I know and no one in my circles ever talks about coral reefs or plastic pollution. I was like, girl, what? I was shocked. Because for me, in my daily life and what I see online, I'm always talking about reducing waste. I'm always talking about lowering carbon emissions. And what I see online is everybody else talking about the same thing. So in my head, I'm like, oh yeah, people are generally aware of these things. Like maybe you listened to this whole episode and you were like, I got nothing out of this. This was the most elementary how to be a more sustainable traveler thing that I've ever seen. That is not true for the majority of people. Most of us are not out here thinking about sustainable travel or how the plastic utensils that I used on my carry-out Chinese food last night could end up in a landfill and sit there for thousands of years and eventually end up in the ocean. We have lots to think about, right? Like these aren't topics that are crossing our minds every day. So I still think it's important to go back to the basics, talk about reducing plastic waste, taking more sustainable methods of travel, walking places instead of always taking an Uber. Let's talk about that. Americans, I'm looking at you. I consider myself as somebody who cares a lot about these things, and through doing the research for this episode, I realized that I still have so much room for improvement in terms of what I do as a traveler. I create waste. One thing I do a lot is I get to-go coffees. Why am I not bringing a to-go coffee cup with me when I'm on vacation? On a recent trip that I took with my mom, we used a lot of plastic water bottles. Sometimes you're in a country or in a region or in a place where the tap water is not okay and you have to use plastic. It's a horrible feeling looking at the, 50 plastic water bottles that you've used and you're waiting to put them in the recycling bin. But it's like, I wish that would have encouraged me to look at other areas of our trip and been like, okay, how can I try to offset the amount of plastic water bottles we're creating by doing something else good for the environment? That could be picking up trash. My mom, she's always getting mentioned on this podcast. She goes and picks up trash everywhere she goes. So it's things like that that are just little tiny shifts to where we go and how we treat the places we go. Going in with the mindset of, okay, I do not want to negatively impact this place. I actually want to help make it a better place. I want to give my money to conservation initiatives. I want to do things that can make this place thrive and help make it better, if anything, by my presence here. In this episode, I didn't go deep into the ethics of mass tourism and over-tourism and massification, which are affecting a lot of really popular tourist spots. I'm not an expert on the issue, and I would love to have an expert on ocean stories to talk about it, which is why I don't fully want to dive into that topic right now. I guess on a very elementary analysis level, I'll just say, look into the places where you're going, and if over-tourism is a very pressing issue that's causing serious impacts to the people that are indigenous, native, local to the area, consider going to what is oftentimes the neighboring town that is like begging people to come and begging for people's money but is completely ignored for the well-known town. Or just try a different area completely. Or if it's your dream location, do a bunch of research and find the most eco-sustainable hotel that's really trying to shift the dynamics of tourism in that place. I didn't really dive into this either, but what about slow travel? What about slow travel, aka the original way of immersing yourself in the world? I think that this trend is slowly dying, but let me know if you've seen this. I see it a lot on travel Facebook pages. People will be like, hey guys, I need help with my 15-day itinerary. I don't know why that's their voice. Maybe they're a man. Hey guys, I need some help with my 15-day itinerary. I'm going to Italy. And on their itinerary, every 2 days they're like, okay, we're going to Florence, Rome, Naples, then we're going to actually go to Spain, we're going to Madrid, Barcelona, Valencia, and then we're actually going to Greece, and then we're flying home. And they're there for 15 days. And you're like, guys, are you even going to see any of the places you're in? Listen, no hate, because I've done a trip like that before in my life. I mean, not moving every 2 days, but I've definitely moved around a little bit. It is so much more rewarding and fun to go somewhere for a week, to really get to know that place, to try different cafes there, to figure out what the people are like there, to just like really experience the culture and the essence and the aura of a place is a million times more fun and rewarding than moving all around every 5 seconds just so that you can say that you've seen the big statue that place is known for. No hate. Like, I like seeing landmarks. I like seeing famous statues. When I was with my mom in Rome, I was like, we're not going to go to the Trevi Fountain. I've seen so many pictures of that. Like, I don't need to go there. But then we actually ended up having time to go. And when I saw it, I was like, wow, I'm actually having an emotional experience right now because this is such a famous place. And it's actually so cool to like see it with my eyes. I've seen this on TV and in movies a million times. I can't believe I'm actually here. That's a lovely experience. And I want everyone to be able to have that like amazing experience of seeing history and seeing a relic, an archaeological whatever. Really take it in, soak it in, stay there for a week, stay there a while, find a little alleyway and meet old Susanna, who is going to show you her vintage shop and show you her collection of silver rings and cut you a deal, and then she'll recommend you to go to this cafe for breakfast where you have the most amazing cafe that you ever had in your life. I don't know. I'm a huge advocate for slow travel. I know some people don't love that name because they're like, this is just I don't know. People get mad at everything now. But I highly recommend it, and it's something that I want to do in my life more. Like, my next travels are not going to be, let's see every country, let's see 30 before 30. In case you haven't known by just knowing me, I'm not that kind of girl, okay? Last thing I'll say, there's a YouTuber that I really like. Her name is Hitomi, and in a recent video she made about visiting the Aegean Sea in Turkey, which is a place that she had been multiple times in her life through different periods of her life, she said something like, there's something really special about connecting with a piece of nature and learning about it and becoming its friend and seeing it change through the seasons and learning its language and really feeling like you understand it on a deep level because you've truly gotten to know it versus just visiting a place for one day. It's truly getting to know what the rocks look like, what the plants look like, what the dirt is like, what the air smells like. And to get to know a place like that, whenever you return, you sort of have a relationship with it where that place has seen you throughout different periods of your life. This was so profound to me because I feel that really strongly with some of the places I've been in my life. The ritual of going to a place I've already been 500 times still has a lot of, it still holds a very precious, beautiful place in my heart because it's still traveling because it's not my home, it's not my home community, but there's still this sense of awe and wonder, and I think it is also inherently a more sustainable way to travel. What an interesting topic, guys. If you made it this far, wow. Let me know what you think. I will say that the first time I went through all of these topics and recorded all of this, I think it was a little bit better. But like I said, I had to redo this entire recording. I had to stop and wait another day. I would love to have a better recording situation, a better background, maybe even a quiet, private place to record. So why don't you get your phone out right now? Click on the Ocean Stories on Spotify. Click on the Ocean Stories on Apple Podcasts. And leave a review because you're helping me get one step closer to having a beautiful background that is not constantly interrupted by barking dogs, and I would appreciate that greatly. I'm sure that I missed a million points in this about sustainable tourism. If you have any tips on how to be a sustainable traveler, let me know on Instagram, let me know in the comments of this episode. Let's talk about it, and I'll see you next week for another episode of How To Ocean Edition. Thanks for taking the time to explore doing something better for the earth. Thank you for taking a little bit of time to reflect. Okay, anyways, love you, bye. Thanks for listening to another episode of Ocean Stories. Don't forget to follow our social media channels for extra content behind the scenes and to connect with our guests. If you like this episode, please leave a review and let us know what you think. See you soon for more Ocean Stories.